All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. For possibly some of you, good morning, I suppose. My name is Robin Howell, and I'm the Vice President of Sarasota University. Welcome to April's monthly Montessori Colloquium. This is something that we do every month on the third Wednesday of every month, and it's a service that we provide to the Montessori community. So you do not have to be part of Sarasota University to enjoy it, and so we strongly encourage you to put it on your calendar and share. One of the things that we really try to do is we try to have a variety of topics that appeal to different people, but of course address issues in Montessori. And so before we talk about this month's issue or this month's topic and our introduction of our guest speaker, I'd like to talk a little bit about Sarasota University. Sarasota University is a university that's a strength-based university that was founded and really currently has two master's degree programs, and our emphasis is Montessori. So we are not existing as a small pocket within a school of education. We are a university entirely dedicated to Montessori. And so if you're interested in learning more about Sarasota University, our current master's degree programs, and the other programs coming up, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Miss Ellen Lastinger, who's going to put her contact info in the chat, and set up a time to hear more about Sarasota University and how it might possibly align with your future goals and what you're trying to accomplish within Montessori. So with that being said, this month, our speaker is Miss Ann Winkler. I've known Ann probably longer than I realized, because I was probably a child when I met her, but Ann has been involved in Montessori for over 40 years. She's a teacher, educator, an expert. I mean, she would not necessarily use this word, but I would use it. An expert in elementary Montessori, and has done work with, in particular, these last, I think, 20 years with the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, which is an organization that Sarasota is very closely related to. And today her topic is cosmic education. And what she's going to be talking about today is the role of cosmic education in the elementary curriculum as the overarching, sort of theme driving elementary curriculum, and then giving some practical advice or practical use, or, well, I'll let Ann actually say it more articulately than me, but talking about how to create a dynamic environment with cosmic education in their elementary environments. And so with that, actually, I want to pass it over to Ann. And Ann, on behalf of Sarasota University, I want to thank you for being here with us. For those of you who are here joining us, I want to thank you. And again, share that this will be recorded. And so if you find this something useful, please feel free to share it with your parents, your teachers, and also look at our library of recorded videos and put it on your calendar or something to attend every month. So with that, Ann, again, thank you so much. And I will pass the baton to you.
Okay, Robin, thank you very much. And yes, you were a kid at Barry when I first met you. And that's where my children went to school as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. Actually, I guess I could pin myself or whatever. Somebody could pin me right now, and then I'd feel like I wasn't just talking to Robin. I feel like it's a direct conversation with him because he's the one I see. So I pinned myself there. Not that I want to look at myself either, but I do recognize several people here tonight. And I do have a PowerPoint, which is going to help guide me through this talk. I want to share as much as I can with you, but I'm also a great believer in, if something says it's over at 8 o'clock, I want it to be over at 8 o'clock. So I hope I don't get too sidetracked, which is a tendency I can have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the PowerPoint here. And I am going to go ahead and I thought it was set up for me to present it as a presenter view, but for some reason that's not happening, but that's okay. So I did have a little agenda. The first part of the presentation, the main part, is about the philosophy of cosmic education. What is it? It is the foundation of our elementary program. And then after we've reviewed that, I wanted to give some concrete ideas for ways in which you can use cosmic education in your classroom, actually in every classroom in your school, or for the school wide. And I'd like to share some ideas with you, and I do have a couple pictures there as well. So that's really the plan for tonight, and then question answer. So if you put questions in the chat room, if that's agreeable to you, before we go to the classroom application section, I'll answer some questions if there are any, and again at the end. But I may have more prepared. You never know about these things, right? So here is our first slide, which is a quote, of course, by Maria Montessori, and where she's talking about, you can read it for yourself, the plan or the cosmic plan. And I love that picture, sort of a spiral. And if you think of life, our lives, they're a spiral. Every child, all of us, we're on this growth pattern. And one thing I always liked to talk about at a birthday celebration in my class was I would, at a section of a nautilus shell, which actually shows the spiral well and all the parts, and it's like a stepladder, right? And I talked about this, and I think of it as growth. So as people who work with children, even though I don't directly work with them all that often anymore, I'm working more with adults, we're all on a growth in our lives and in our lives with children. So if we're just coming into this work as a new teacher, we've been in it for a long time, like I have, or Priya, who I know is here tonight, we're still growing. I'm still learning. I learn from the adult learners all the time. And I find that to be very important, that we keep that in mind. So Montessori talked to us about the cosmic task, right? And we have to think about it. What is a cosmic task? Well, everything connects to this sort of cosmic plan. Everything, great and small, has a mission. Even the tiniest little organism in the or bacteria has a mission, or virus, for example. They have a mission, and that's their cosmic task. Ours, well, you have to find out what yours is yourself, but as a teacher or in teaching, one of our cosmic tasks is to help the children develop and grow. I don't know, somebody must have their microphone open, or maybe it's me, but it would be helpful if we could keep them muted. Anyway,
I'm going to go through, and please do not feel offended if I mute you if you're not Ann right now. So I will go ahead and do that.
It's always helpful because, it just interferes with our thinking. So we want to remember the idea of the cosmic task, and and that in cosmic education, which is the foundation of the elementary curriculum, everything that we do inside the curriculum, inside math, language, it's all part of the cosmic plan. And it's all part of our job as educators to create an environment that helps the children grow according to their needs and tendencies. So as children enter the second plane at 6 years old through 12 years old, these children, when they first enter at 6, they're just coming out of that absorbent mind period, right? And into the reasoning mind of the elementary. And So the reasoning mind and the imagination are key factors to their intellectual development. And we have their intellectual development sort of in our hands, right? It's our job to connect with them and link them to the environment that we have prepared. So the child at 6 is starting to ask questions. Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is my role? Why am I here? I'm still asking those questions. We're always asking these questions, but children are beginning to ask those questions when they enter the 6-year-old classroom or the 6 to 9. Now, when they move on to the 9 to 12 or the sort of second part of the second plane, unless you teach a 6 to 12, they have had that 3-year experience, hopefully in lower elementary or junior elementary, whatever you want to call it, or a 6 to 9 class. And that final year has been their leadership year, their kind of crowning glory year, where they have been able to demonstrate their abilities to be leaders. And so when they enter the 9 to 12, they already have that, and they're already asking these questions and have a desire to learn. So the child is always seeking their own identity. So what are the goals we have for cosmic curriculum or education? Well, we want to help children see themselves and the materials in our classroom in relation to the history of humankind and the universe as a whole. Montessori, of course, says we need to give the children the universe. That's a big job. Traditionally, in a traditional school and curriculum, they kind of go self, individual, to the family, to the community, to the state, to the nation, to the world. That's sort of the progression. Where in elementary, we're doing the opposite. We're giving them the big picture first, and we're going from the whole to the part. And the whole helps us to better understand those parts, those questions like, where did I come from? Or why am I here? We allow the child to reflect on the interconnectedness of things. And I think that there'll be a slide with that chart on it, but that serves as an aid to life, the curriculum, the cosmic education, by meeting the needs of the second plane child. And it provides them with those tools they need to be a productive member of society. They can look for and discover their own strengths and weaknesses, right? And they develop academic skills, emotional intelligence. And our intention is to help children understand what is the work of humans and what did humans before them do? How did they develop? Talking about evolution and progress. And all these topics are introduced with sort of a historical background and a lot of timelines. And we'll get into the introduction of great lessons. So this has always been one of my favorite words from the first time I heard it in my training, an engram. So Montessori speaks of engrams in lots of ways, but it's really we talk about planting seeds, right? She said, broadcast as many seeds as you can. I just planted some seeds in my garden, for example, and I keep going out there to see if they've germinated yet, but nothing has happened. But I'm waiting patiently because I'm giving those seeds all the necessary things they need to germinate. And that's what we're doing in our classrooms. So an engram is really something in the subconscious mind. So we retain traces of our experiences that we've had in our subconscious mind. And later, those experiences we may come to our conscious mind. So she talked about the subconscious mind is the nimi, and you read all about that in the absorbent mind. And only a small part of what we get enters our conscious mind. And all of our life experiences are retained in the nimi. And it's not just an accumulation of memories. And these are called engrams, what's left behind. And I know that it's true, and I know that it works because I have experience with, I don't know, I would really like to move my screen up, but for some reason, oops, I just moved my slide. So now I would like to go backwards to where I was. So I know this is true because I had a student many, many years ago at my school who was with me from preschool all the way through 6th grade because I kept moving with this group of children. When they entered 6 to 9, I moved. I had taken my training and I moved. So these were kids that were with me for many years. And one day I was sitting in my office and somebody came in and said to me, "Oh, there's this gentleman at the gate who wants me to tell you that your favorite is there." And I said, I knew who it was immediately because that's something he always said to me. "Am I your favorite? Am I your favorite?" And I would say, "Well, you're my favorite child named William," etc. So anyway, he came in, and as we were talking, he was telling me about his college experience. And he said, "I took a class on like an earth science or class or geology class." And he said, "I already knew everything. I was so surprised because I remembered touching the clay in the classroom and making all these land and water forms. And I had all kinds of colors of clay, and they made great big sceneries with these." And so these memories that she talks about really do work. So those seeds you're planting, they may not always seem like they're growing, but they're in their subconscious mind. And this is, of course, to educate the human potential. It's a quote. The book is so important. If you don't have that book, if you haven't read that book, I just urge you to do that. It's wonderful and really details the idea of the cosmic curriculum. So Montessori said to us that there's a plan. I feel like my slides got a little out of order here. Oh, they didn't. I don't understand what's happening with my little thing. There we go. Here we go. This is the quote I wanted to talk about because it's the teacher's task. And I don't know how many of you are teaching in an elementary classroom. I know some of you are, or some of you are teacher educators or you're teaching adults. But Montessori said, the teacher's task is no small or easy one when it comes to cosmic education. She has to prepare a huge amount of knowledge to satisfy a child's mental hunger. She's not like an ordinary teacher limited by a syllabus. Now, we have albums, but that's not a syllabus. It isn't telling us today you're teaching this, and next is this, and next is this. The teacher has, boy, the gender changes, himself to acquire a reasonable acquaintance with every subject. And even then, only the outer shell, or like the tip of the iceberg, will have been pierced. But let the teacher take heart, for you will not be without help. She says there's a plan for this task of the teacher in cosmic education. Somebody is in the waiting room. I just let them in. So I think that's really important to remember because I don't know, I know of a lot of people that I've worked with in as adult learners who feel kind of overwhelmed by cosmic education. It's so big, it's so broad. How do I do it? And I know Robin, is teaching. Are you teaching how to teach it all? Or is
Right now I'm helping
Michael?
now I'm helping Michael teach it while he's recovering.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that's a class you can take that helps you to kind of figure out some of the ins and outs of it. But as a Montessori teacher, teaching elementary and implementing cosmic education, you have to be a generalist. You have to know something about a lot of things, but you don't have to know it all. First of all, we don't have to give it all to the children. In fact, we shouldn't. We want to give them the general picture of something and then find out more. But you do have to study and learn. And if you don't know something, if you're going to follow children and they're coming up with an idea and you don't know much about that subject, then you want to find out more.
Can I add one thing in, actually? Is that, what you just talked about, like, the whole idea of you can teach it all. The reality is you cannot teach it all. So it's almost a oxymoron, right? But the reality is, one of the things is, because cosmic education, or the elementary, really the elementary Montessori curriculum covers everything in the history of humanity and before. And so if you think about that statement and you try to think, how am I going to teach it all? That you can't. And
right.
So more importantly is looking at, what are key components, understanding your plan, understanding what your learning objectives are, and, trying to teach what's manageable, but really strike the imagination of the child so that it's important and it's relevant to their own experience, especially, we're talking about elementary, as they enter this second plane. And so what you're talking about, Anne, makes great sense, but it's a really important thing that I would like to share, is that you cannot teach it all, even though we can talk about trying to.
Right. Robin's right. There's no way you can teach it all. But what you can do to feel like you have a handle on it is not be overwhelmed. And that's part of the practical part, some ideas of how you could implement and integrate curriculum, because I think you can do that with cosmic education. So anyway, what is this plan that Maria Montessori said we'd have? Well, the first part of that plan is to understand the philosophy of Montessori and recognize and understand our responsibilities when it comes to that. And secondly, to understand and know about the needs and tendencies of the second plane child. Very important. And Robin just mentioned the two most important. Well, I mentioned reasoning mind, imagination. Those are the two most important. The second part of the plan is the prepared environment. And when we're talking about elementary, you want to have materials and lessons and activities that stretch the mind and build the intellect. And we already talked about the teacher being a generalist. I would like to say that, especially in 9 to 12, you don't need to have a lot of materials on the shelf like cards. The idea would be that you give the inviting lesson that is impressionistic storytelling in some way, and the children become excited and they create the materials, or they create the project. And the third part of the plan is the freedom to choose work. So what does that mean? Work, first of all, should be constructive and productive. And it should be, the only limit to it is that children need to learn certain things, what society expects of a child by a certain age, or those state standards, let's say. We are limited by the fact that they need to do that. So hopefully, most of the time, often, they're advanced, and that's not too much of a worry, but it is a factor. And we could talk in another time about what does constructive and productive work look like. I've got some ideas to share with you later. So first of all, the first part of this, I don't know what is skipping about my clicking on these slides, but something is. The first part of the cosmic curriculum that's so important are those 5 great lessons, right? Everything else in the classroom is built off of those 5. So the first, the story of the universe. The second, following the story of life. How did life come to be on that planet that we talked about in the first story? And then humans. How did they come about? What is the story of humans? And there's a lot that goes, and we'll talk about that, what happens after these. Then the story of numbers or math, the history of math, and the story of communication, or the history of language and communication. So those are those 5 great lessons that should be offered every year to every child from 6 to 12. If they've been to that lesson in the past, they don't have to come to it. Now, I never had that happen. It could be that it does, but most children want to come to them. And that's been my experience. But we should offer them every year in the beginning of the year, because they set the stage for the rest of whatever we're going to do. Also, I just want to mention the book, Children of the Universe. That's another book by Michael and Danielle Duffy. If you don't have that book, I highly recommend it as well. Okay. So those great lessons, again, they're impressionistic lessons. And we're telling a story with those. So that first we have the story about how the universe was created. And that particular story is impressionistic. The room should be dark. It should be exciting. We want to spark the children's imagination and inspire them to explore and study further. So we're going to always do the story first and then the study. So we're not going to have a timeline on the floor first. We're going to have this story. In that story, there are experiments that are done, and those are usually very inspiring and inspirational to the children. They want to repeat those, and those should be available for them to do. And the story of life, though, that may just be a story that you tell. And after you tell that story, the next day, you are going to tell the story, or even the same day, of the timeline of life. And the same thing with the story of humans. But this timeline of life is the study. It's not the story. Whoops, going back again to the, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I don't really have a clue why this wants to keep happening. But there's a big picture that I made many years ago of the cosmic curriculum and the 5 great lessons, and then all the lessons that could come after it. And that's kind of, there are a lot on there, but there's no limit. So when you want to say, can you teach it all? No, you can't. But year 1 of 3 years, you may want to have a lot of astronomy lessons. Maybe you're studying ancient Greece as your history, which would be following the coming of humans. And those astronomy lessons might go along well with that particular study. The coming of life, after that we have, after the timeline of life, we've got all of the biology materials. And there are so many, it's so varied. And the story of numbers, well, we know we have beautiful math materials. And after the story of writing or language, we can introduce more language lessons, but we can always integrate a lot of that, or we may be able to, into our history study. And into that, we can incorporate science and biology. This is just another picture of the same thing, sort of a listing of what might come after each of those great lessons in a curriculum. And you could not possibly do that in 3 years. You couldn't give all those lessons. So you have to make your plan for what you plan to do in that particular year. Because when you're giving lessons, and believe me, lessons are the key. The children are not going to be inspired or interested in studying something unless you've given a lesson. So lessons are important. You should be giving them to small groups of children. And when you're giving the lessons, you're building on the previous knowledge. That's part of the spiraling curriculum. You want to always keep the key points of what you want to tell, the story or the lesson, in your mind, right? You don't want to give out too much information at one time. That's really important because you can overwhelm the children, just like we get overwhelmed when we get too much information at one time. The presentations should be clear, and they should end with the idea that there's more to come. And one thing that I did almost every time was to ask, what do you want to know more about? What do you want to do next? What would you like to learn more about? And in 9 to 12, I actually, because accountability is part of the picture of a child developing their intellect and developing their reason, I would write down what they wanted to know more about and say, okay, next week, when we come back for a new lesson, I want you to bring back the answer, right? Because we're trying to encourage them to do some research. Or they may have another idea of a big project they'd like to do. Keep in mind balance for you. Base your lessons and presentations on the interests of the children. So you've got to know your children. Don't forget what they're required to know. This says according to public school, but according to standards, right? Skills and concepts that are required are not choices. Children must attend, but they do have a choice of when, where, and with whom they come to the lesson. Those are particular, like to learn to add is required. However, how they do it, with whom they do it, when they do it, could possibly be a choice. And then take care of your own self in balance. That is very important. So the Montessori teacher, we're guides, right? We're not a sage on a stage, as we used to say. We don't dispense information. We want to, because that creates passive learners. They just memorize, regurgitate, like a workbook kind of an activity. The guide is a storyteller. And in elementary and the cosmic curriculum, creating stories that that are the beginning of your lesson. I think that's very important, to go into the lesson ready with a story or an idea or something that's going to inspire the children. Have real examples of things, if you can, of plants, animals. Have real discussions that are about who bakes bread or who makes bread, economic geography, that kind of thing. You can make those things come to life. And we all have the charts, the geography impressionistic charts in our classrooms. We want to not just show a chart, but tell a story about it, kind of make it come to life in some way to inspire the children and make an impression on them for further wanting to study further.
And
So
can I
yes.
ask, excuse me, one, is now a good time to ask questions if anybody has a questions, or would you prefer they wait?
I'm looking at my Yeah, they could ask them now. In fact, it's perfect timing.
Okay, and then a second thing that I just wanted to suggest that's, again, just being an elementary Montessori educator, one of the things I found was really powerful is that so much of what we get with our Montessori training is based on certain things that were developed in some cases many decades ago. And one of the things that I think is really powerful, especially with older students, is presenting information, but also as more relevant information comes up, presenting relevant information in a way that says, you know what, here's a story we did, or here's we're studying a hominid, or here's what we learned about biology, and here's something I just read today in the paper that basically suggests that, for example, that as part of that the Americas were not pre-populated by people that came from Beringia, but they were already there. So introducing them, and again, trying to find ways to strike their imagination and not being stuck on necessarily the traditional Montessori curriculum, but letting them know that history is evolving, science is evolving, and cosmic education, as including both those pieces, is evolving. Do you agree with that, or do you think?
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, if you're teaching science today, you better be looking it up before you go to teach the lesson. Because what I learned in my teacher training in the 90s about the theories of how life began on Earth, before I started teaching teachers about teaching that, and before I really gave the lesson to the children again, I found out, well, gee, there's more ideas, there's more theories. There's things I don't have in my lesson. I need to add these things because you've got to keep up. That's another task we have as a
And I
right.
think by doing that too, you're also inspiring kids to know that there's still stuff out there for them to discover, and they can be part of it. So anyway, so I'd like to open it up to questions, actually, since you said it was a good time, man.
Yeah, it's fine.
I know you have more to do, but or please feel free to.
No, I'm at a place where I was just going to talk about some ways to, in your classroom or your school that you could do things. So if there are questions and it takes time, that's fine. Are there questions?
Does anybody have questions at this point before we talk about practical applications?
Feel free to open up your mic and just speak because I can't see you right now.
Well, then I would suggest moving forward, and then we'll ask the same question in a couple minutes.
Okay, that's either good or not good. I don't know. Anyway, so one thing that I learned when my children were students at Berry School in Maryland, and Tim was their head of school, we had a cultural day every year, and it was around, children brought food from other countries. Each classroom studied a country. Well, when I moved to Florida and then I had my own school, I learned a lot there, and I built my school and some ideas that were similar. And one of those similar ideas was a cultural day that we had to have and still have two times a year, usually in late October and again in the spring. And these cultural days have developed into opportunities for deep study by the children. Now, you can do this. This is something that can be one class. You could, if you just want to do it with your class and have a special day, you call a cultural day, you can do that. Or it could be, for example, if you have a big school and you have 3 lower elementaries, maybe you have the lower elementary class cultural day. Or as at my school, it's school wide. But and I'll talk a little bit about that, but there are lots of opportunities for the children to help and inspire one another through their work. You've got parent participation happening. it's an opportunity for you to bring in and make a lot of connections with the cosmic curriculum. For example, science, well, I can speak about it a little bit more in detail, but it's also an opportunity for goings out, for children to plan going out, for you to plan a whole field trip, for visitors to come in, and it can be differentiated by age level. For example, middle school and 9 to 12-year-olds may study whatever the topic is. Let's say the topic is a continent. Everybody's going to study in the school. It's going to focus on the North America continent. And so those upper and middle school children probably be thinking about lots of projects they can do. They can work in groups or individually. When we did these things, the children made costumes, they made projects. But for upper elementary and further, well, we have middle school also, that study lasted from the beginning of school till the cultural day, end of October. But for lower elementary, maybe it was just October, right? From the beginning and end of October. They didn't spend all that time, but they did do projects. They did usually make some sort of costume. And even primary would have some art projects or activities for the children to do. And then on that cultural day at our school, parents came and visited the school. We had food, usually a lunch. Sometimes the children they displayed their projects, etc. And I've got some photo, whoops. And once again, I just don't get this. This was Egypt, right? So ancient Egypt day. And it's just a picture. You can see there were displays everywhere around the whole school. There was no, it was just a culmination and presentation of what the children had been doing in school. Here's a picture of some children playing a Senate game that they had made. And of course, they all made those collars. They brought in fabric. They made their own costumes. For every cultural day, at least in the 9 to 12, the children did make and design their own costumes. That's just another photo of the same kind of thing. And they set up like a bazaar outside, they called it. So there's an opportunity, though, for you to integrate all your subjects. So when we were doing this, we were studying science, chemistry, mummification is chemistry, history, archaeology, art, music, various subjects integrated into the work. And I think that gives you an opportunity to bring all those parts of cosmic education. This has nothing to do with ancient Egypt, but it is have to do with children of different ages cooperating, doing an activity where they're actually crossing a river here, metaphorically. And you can see the young lady with a child on her back. They really had to cooperate. So there's lots of opportunities when you do these kinds of activities, not just for them to write reports or make projects, but also to work together and to appreciate the different ages that you have in your school. I always enjoyed the idea that they could come together as a whole school, or in this case, there were no very young children involved in this, but say lower and upper elementary together, working together, cooperating, and learning together. It's another example of that. You see children doing different things in this picture. Some maybe doing nothing, but I know what they were doing, but they were really working together. Here's another example when I spoke of costumes. Down here, we have some primary age children whose costumes were, this I believe was Stone Age. I don't remember exactly, but they made paper bag costumes or paper costumes. And it was simple in just a few days, maybe a week, that they spent learning about different things. And then this is an older student who's done quite an extensive project, built some tools. And I think his project, if I'm remembering, was on defense. And this is the costume that he made. So there's really a lot of opportunity for that. And I don't, this really, the last slide I have, we could get deeper into things, but I don't think it's already 10 till, and I know that they want to talk a little bit about Sarasota University. And I'd love to know if you do have any comments or questions, or you wanted to tell about things that you do in your classroom or your school that are ways that you implement the cosmic curriculum. I'm just trying to look at the.
And look at, there's a question, the very last comment in the chat.
Oh, if you are only a specialty teacher, like language, music, etc., what are some principles for linking that back to the cosmic curriculum? Well, that I'll just give you an example. This is with upper elementary and middle school students in Spanish. When we were studying the westward movement in American history, they were having to build a wagon, right? Covered wagon out of different kinds of wood pieces that we had and wheels, and they had to purchase this wood with their metaphorical money. And they, the Spanish teacher was known to give some of the best deals for selling, if they wanted to sell something to get some money to buy their wood, but she didn't understand any English, so they had to speak Spanish to get her really good deal. So that's just an example, but there's certainly, I would include the specialist teachers at my school in on what it was that the plan was, what we were doing curriculum wise, and encourage them to introduce ideas in their classes that had to do with the topic. Maybe read some books in another language. So does that make sense or help you, Jessica?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I see somebody wanted the books, but did somebody put?
I'm going to get that list from you and send it out with my email tomorrow. And there is another comment from Gretchen. It says, we combine upper and lower L students to do a project together every spring, country research. Then we have a big fair that the whole school is invited to.
That is awesome. That's exactly pretty much what we're talking about here. I think it's nice when you can involve the whole school. When we studied medieval history at one point, the middle and upper elementary students put on a Renaissance fair, and they had activities for the younger children to go and participate in. So it's a similar idea and a really good one. I really like that. And I think country studies, continent studies are really good jumping off places for these kinds of work. Okay, well, I appreciate your attention. Ellen or Robin,
I
I had a question. I had my hand raised,
Aaron
but-
Lincoln's email or message rather.
okay, so somebody had their hand raised, and go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually Norman Lorenz. I'm one of the faculty with Sarasota University, and I want to thank you on behalf of our work in the master's program in Montessori education leadership. And one of the questions that I would ask you, and this is I guess it might be when we think about Bloom's taxonomy and compare it to the Montessori 3-period lesson, it's that place where the child demonstrates how they implement what we've shown them, what they've practiced, and how they become inclusive. We look to the world and certainly to this nation in looking at the sensitivities of what we call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think as Montessori schools, we're oftentimes faced, because of its private sector ingenuity, as well as how we formulate them into the public or charter worlds. My question to you is, can you speak a little bit about, and certainly the cosmic curriculum spiral offers it, but we come from a mainly Caucasian population. And as we diversify our understandings of what that means, right, as we look primarily to people of color, and how do we educate our parents and our community when by and large our schools come predominantly in Caucasian worlds, and we can't necessarily change that unless everybody influentially moves in and diversifies the city or the county itself. But how do we educate our community on the beauty of what you have just demonstrated, that the diversity and the value of equity and inclusion are embedded into Montessori curriculum? How might you see that for all of us who are training teachers to work with parents? How do we illuminate that for ourselves?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of work being done in this field right now, and hopefully our programs, our teacher education programs, are doing a lot more or placing a lot more emphasis on how to help teachers achieve these goals. So that's one thing. I always like to think that we're helping children, and through our work, they're understanding interdependency, connection, relationships, justice, and love, and they're going to go out in the world and keep that going. But I know that that's not always the case. So your question is a good one and a hard one to answer, because it's very important. But today, at least in my state, it's become one that's a topic some parents don't want to have you discuss. Yeah.
Right. Critical race theory as an example.
Right. So, I mean, we're a private school. My school is a private school. We have some diversity, not as much as I wish we did. But there are a lot of Montessori public schools that are very diverse, I think, in their populations. Now, one thing I don't know about is schools like in indigenous people or Native American Montessori schools. That I don't know much about. Robin, do you know of many schools that might be
talking about indigenous people versus Columbus Day, that sort of thing?
We'll talk about it, but where the population of the school has a lot of indigenous people or native.
I mean, I know that there are Montessori schools out like in Nevada and that sort of area where the population is different, even in southern Utah. And then, I mean, there's so many different types of schools. One of the schools I'm working with, actually where I'm at right now, the largest population is Lebanese. And so again, how do you take these principles and apply them to the culture they're currently existing in, but also how to acknowledge the culture they're existing in, but also help them understand a bigger picture of, or part of a greater, world of people.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, there are schools that are predominantly this, or this. And I think that one of the things that you talked about, Anne, today, and one of the things I would sort of emphasize is, that the purpose of cosmic education is helping children recognize their place in the world. So again, at the second plane, they're now able to think about, okay, I'm not just thinking about my nuclear family. I'm thinking about, okay, I am a small piece. 4 billion years had to happen for me to be here. There are other people. How is it all interconnected? What is my role? And there are different ways to do that. And you captured a lot of those today, Ann.
Well, I also, Aaron Lincoln, you left a great comment about your cultural day. I urge you to read these, and you can also save the chat, if you want to, as part of this evening.
Well, one of the things that maybe this is a good transition point as we approach the hour is that Ellen is going to be sending out the link to this recording and also the YouTube page that has our previous recordings. She's also going to be sending out a link to some of the books that were mentioned. And so I think the 2 books that were mentioned today in particular were the Duffy book. And I mentioned in the chat, The Deep Well of Time, which I will give a plug for. I think it's a wonderful book that
It's excellent. Yeah.
that Dr. Michael Dorr, one of our good friends for many of us at the university and many of us in Montessori know. He has a new book out, but we'll make sure we send those links. So we'll make sure everybody gets that. And that's one of the benefits of signing up for these is, even if you don't attend sometime, if you sign up and we talk about something important like redirecting children's behavior or positive discipline or whatever, we'll send the resources your way. I know there are a lot of other questions and things that we could continue talking about, but to be respectful of people's time, I want to, if it's okay, share a couple of things before we leave. So one of the things I want to recapture, because again, this is a Sarasota University colloquium, is I want to share that Sarasota University is a university that's a Montessori geared university. And so if you've ever been interested in pursuing higher education, getting a master's degree, I would strongly suggest looking at Sarasota University. Couple reasons why, without going into a long spiel, is we are a Montessori university, not a university existing within a bigger university, but we're geared towards Montessori. Like Dr. Lorenz, who's here with us tonight, and Dr. Lindsay Pollock, who are here, both here, everybody who teaches at our university or is involved in our university are practitioners. That means they are actively involved in the Montessori world. We are not armchair theorists. So if you're interested in pursuing higher education as part of your career goals, I'd strongly encourage you to do it. Also, because you're here, there is a small admissions fee that you're eligible to be waived for. Reach out to Ellen. You have that email in the chat. So please just, if you think it might be something that's part of your career goal, I would strongly encourage you to explore it. And again, without going down too many rabbit holes, one of the things that came up in the info session recently is, why do people get master's degrees? A master's degree, or any degree really, is a demonstration to a different level of your commitment to your craft and a demonstration of your desire to learn more. And the last thing I'll say about Sarasota University is this is meant to be a degree that impacts practice. So that means, we can seriously talk about Montessori 100 years ago, but what we really want to do is look at, for example, in budgeting, how has budgeting changed and what is practical now? Or how do things like we talked about today, equity, how does that play in? So this is meant to be an action research-based university where you're going to take components of your courses and apply them immediately to your practice. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, we would love to hear from you. And that's my last of it for my plug for Sarasota. But Ann, on behalf of the university, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who joined, I know it's a Wednesday evening, it's 8 o'clock Eastern time, so it's late. I hope you got something valuable that you can take back to your classrooms. And if there's anything we can do to help, please reach out. So with that, I wish you all a very wonderful evening.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you all. And I will end recording.
Bye, Clara. Nice to see you. And Mary Bixler, too.